everyone. Welcome to the Northern Kentucky Spotlight Podcast presented by CVG. I'm your host, Sarah Brookbank. I hope you guys are having a great start to your work week. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Candace Gasper of Digital Candy LLC. She talks about the importance of social media for small businesses and shares her tips for getting started, as well as her view of the future of social media. On NKY at Work, Nancy Spivey is joined by Julie Hopkins of Strauss Troy, who shares basic rules to remember when hiring minors this summer. Thank you to our podcast sponsors, CVG, our title sponsor, C-Crew Consulting, our digital sponsor, and our episode sponsor, Haran. We have a few exciting events coming up this month at the Chamber. First up on May 9th, we have Eggs and Issues, Tourism's Impact in Northern Kentucky. This month's panel will be moderated by Julie Kirkpatrick of Meet NKY and will feature speakers from the Florence Yalls, Newport Aquarium, and the Ark Encounter, as well as the Creation Museum. And on May 10th, we have HR 100, Employee Engagement Strategies, which will highlight tactics to foster an engaged workplace culture. You can register for both of those events now at nkychamber.com/events. That's all I have for you guys right now, so let's go meet our members of the week, hear from our sponsors, and Nancy and I will be back with our guests.
CVG Airport is the lowest fare airport in the tri-state region with 54 nonstop flights and direct international service to 7 destinations, including Paris, France, and now home to both DHL's and Amazon's global cargo hubs. The airport is furthering its position as leader in aviation and is deeply committed to being an economic driver for the community. You can learn more and start your next adventure at cvgairport.com.
Ranking on Google Search and Maps is easy to understand, but hard to do. It requires constant effort and attention, uploading new photos, responding to Google reviews, writing weekly posts, and checking suggested updates. Google listing optimization takes experience and time, and there are no shortcuts. C-Crew gives your Google My Business account the steady, consistent attention it needs to be effective, optimizing, updating, and expanding critical content every single week. From local retail stores to large regional networks, C-Crew generates content, establishes benchmarks, and creates dramatic, measurable increases in engagement. So what can C-Crew do for your business? More calls, more clicks, more clients.
Congratulations to our members of the week. You can learn more about these businesses by following the Northern Kentucky Chamber on social media, where we will highlight one of these businesses each day. Now, let's meet our members of the week. Mental Health America of Northern Kentucky and Southwest Ohio is dedicated to promoting mental health and working to prevent mental and substance use disorders through education, advocacy, and service. Grand Welcome of Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky Short-Term Rental Property Management is a locally owned boutique-style short-term rental management company focused on serving the local community. LIDA maximizes project management value through a commitment to execution with a focus on efficiency and results at an appropriate level of investment. Laughing Bees makes handcrafted honeybee caramels in small batches using local honey. Lost Art Press publishes high-quality books printed in the U.S. and sells books at a fair price that allows them to stay in business and treat authors fairly. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I am joined by Candace Gasper, who is the owner of Digital Candy. So, Candace, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk about social media with you. We haven't had a social media guest in a very long time. So, first, tell me about your business, how you got started.
Yeah, so I lost my job in 2019, and it was at a startup based out of Charlotte, and it was also a digital marketing agency, and I lived here. But he gave me a small severance and let me leave with 2 clients, and I kind of just hit the ground running and have been running ever since.
Yeah, that is awesome. So tell us a little bit about like the clients you work with and the stuff that you guys do for your clients.
Yeah, so I work with a wide range of clients, anywhere from like pet care and pet food to eco-friendly products like pillow covers for physical therapists or chiropractors or anybody who would be using a traditional cloth or paper pillow cover in their practice. I work with Pensive Distilling in Newport. I know they're a chamber member.
Yes, they are.
Let's see. I've worked with Go Bananas. I've worked with Delgardo's, Ruby's Chocolates. I've worked with just really a wide range of people. I have a client right now who is based out of Kigali, which is in Rwanda, and it's a lifestyle magazine.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So it's just a wide variety, like
Yeah.
you said. One of the things I really want to touch on with you, especially when we think about our small business members, because there are so many member businesses of ours that are small businesses. What's the importance of social media to a business like that?
Yeah, so there's the different platforms, right? And they all serve their different purpose. I like to view Facebook as like a living yellow pages. So basically, it's where people are going to check to see if you're alive, basically.
Right.
So, you want to make sure you're updating that. To me, Instagram is a place where you can build community with your audience. So a place where they can feel safe and included and happy and inspired and all these like really wonderful things you want them to feel. And then short form video content that you would see on like YouTube Shorts or TikTok or Reels, I think is great for showing more of your personality. So it's definitely like this, there's no one path. It's kind of this big umbrella, all encompassing.
Yeah. And when you think about small businesses, that's really what I would think about when I think about social media and like our membership. When you're thinking about how people can get started, what are some things that you would recommend to people that either like don't do social media every day or don't have a social media presence?
Yeah, so I would recommend just picking one platform to focus on. If that's just Facebook or just Instagram or just TikTok. And it's especially if you're just starting. And also too, I guess if you're like trying to revive a dead presence, like for example, the client that's based out of Rwanda, they've basically been dead for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
The person who had it before just, lost inspiration, I guess. They just didn't want to deal with it anymore, and they ended up selling the business, and that's how I ended up getting involved with it because I had a client who bought it. And anyway, so it's been kind of a heavy lift trying to get Facebook and Instagram going again because it had been dead for so long,
Mm-hmm.
but that's just what we had to do. So I would recommend, if you're not in that position, to just choose one platform and run with it.
Yeah.
I also don't think I used to think like you had to feed the beast, which is like feeding the algorithm every day. And I don't really believe in that anymore. I think it's about providing valuable content to your audience and making sure that you're sharing things that are relatable to your audience and interesting to them.
Yeah, useful tidbits of information too. Especially I know like restaurant clients, it's like opening times, specials, things that like really like what is your audience looking for, I think is the big thing. One of the other things that you also do is you don't just do social, you guys do like website management and working on getting e-commerce set up.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, so I wanted to get into that because even though social is really easy and fun, it shouldn't be your only point of communication with your audience. I don't know if anyone's as online as I am, but Instagram and Facebook do go down a couple times a year and you don't have access to your audience. You have no way to let them know if you're open or if what your specials are, like you're saying with bars and restaurants. So being able to build an email list and having a website allows you to have control over a point of contact with your audience.
Yeah. And what are some things you recommend when you're working with clients to like build that out? What kind of things do you guys special in that like aspect?
So we specialize in SEO optimization, so making sure that your website is one, up to date, and two, optimized for search. And then also creating email strategies, so creating like 3 month, 6 month, or 1 year email campaigns for your audience. Because even though we're all inundated with emails, they still work, people still read them, and they still do drive sales.
Yeah. I know one of the things that you had mentioned before we started talking was the email. Is it dead or is it not dead?
It's definitely not dead. And it's like, it's so important because like I said, there are times when Instagram is being finicky, when Facebook is down, and you have, that's your only point of contact. What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. You know? It's also, you don't control anything that happens on Instagram or Facebook. Right. So they change things, they can decide that your content, I've had clients, I don't know when or like why this happened, but get content reported and it gets taken down. And it's all of these things that are so out of your control. So you want to make sure that you have a line of communication that you control.
Yeah. You definitely want the ownership of the email list.
Yeah.
That's like a really big thing in content marketing and digital marketing. One of the other things I think is really interesting now in the social media space is collaboration, especially with influencers. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I actually just attended a workshop through FOHR. They're one of like the largest influencer network agencies. So it's kind of like a modeling agency, but for influencers. And it was just talking about the future of influencer marketing and how imperative it is for the success of small or large businesses to utilize influencer marketing. I know it gets kind of a bad rap because in some ways sometimes it's like herding cats, but it's really worth it. And I really like to stress to clients, influencer marketing is about building relationships, not just with your audience through the influencer, but with the influencer as well. I try to view each influencer that I work with and treat them as if I would a friend, because it is that like one-to-one relationship. And, they can do really powerful things for you. And what's nice too is I've worked with so many different ones on like different accounts that now when I have a project coming up, I kind of have this like laundry list of people that I can reach out to that I feel comfortable with using.
If you're working with an influencer and you're a small business, like what would be the benefits of it?
Yeah, so getting access to audiences that you might not otherwise be able to access because you would be coming to them as a brand and not as a person. People trust people. And even though my role as a social media manager is to help humanize a brand, at the end of the day, it's still a brand.
Right.
So utilizing influencers for that humanization aspect. And then also, people online obviously are already talking. They're probably already talking about something that's related to your business. So influencers help you enter that conversation without interrupting it. So, it's like, if you imagine, like you're like banging on the door, like, let me in. But then the influencer helps you open the door and enter through the door.
Yeah. And that is such, the influencer thing, it's not new. I feel like with TikTok and with Instagram, the partnerships that we're seeing, especially in short video, have really started to gain a lot of traction. What do you think is in store for the future of social media?
Well, a lot. I have some pretty crazy theories.
Well, let's hear them. I'm interested.
So for influencer marketing, what they talked about at the 4 webinar is that the future of advertising is not going to be like your traditional advert where it's like, buy here, save now. It's going to be an experience. So now when you think about influencer marketing, it's not like they're like, oh, you need to buy this iPhone, right? It's you see them using the iPhone, you see them accessing apps, you see them engaging with the product or the service, and that's what sells you, not like a traditional, header copy ad type thing. And then also, so when we first started with social, like 10 years ago, we measured success with quantitative metrics, so like numbers, engagement, reach, likes, comments. But I think that the future of social is not going to, like the success of your social media presence online is not going to be measured quantitatively, but qualitatively. We are starting to see this shift of more community-based users. So platforms like Discord or Reddit or Twitter, like where you build these like digital communities. And that's what I think the future of social is about. I think we've forgotten that the social aspect of social media, a lot of times businesses go online and they are like, okay, how can I sell? How can I advertise? When that's not how you should be approaching it at all. The approach should be through a community-driven lens.
And Candace, this has been a really great conversation. Before I let you go, is there anything else about social or digital that you want to share with our listeners and viewers today?
Just that don't be afraid to show your personality. Don't be afraid to approach your audience as you would a friend. And make sure that you're engaging with your audience and making them feel good before engaging with you. I know that can be hard because sometimes people leave really nasty things, and you have that knee-jerk reaction where you want to say something naughty back. But you have to understand that people have feelings, and there's someone on the other side of the screen. So you want to make sure you're engaging with people in the same way you would if you were in person.
Right. Definitely the people behind the computer screen is something that we often forget. But Candace, last thing, how can people get in touch with you if they would like to reach out?
You can email me at Candace, CANDACE, at digitalcandyllc.com, or can I say that they can text me? I'm a texter.
Yes, that's fine.
Or you can text me at 859-576-2041. And then I have a website. It's just www.digitalcandyllc.com.
All right. Well, Candace, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was great talking with you.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
I know. We try to make it fun. We try to make it easy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Spivey, Vice President of Talent Strategies for the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. On today's NKY at Work segment, we're talking about a great topic, which is minors in employment. And I'm here with Julie Hopkins, who is a labor and employment attorney with Strauss. Welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. It's nice to be here.
Hey, very nice to have you. So tell me a little bit about the age. Like when I talk about minors, what does that mean?
Right. So it's really important. Summer's almost here. We're excited about it. It's a sunny day. And there's a labor crunch.
Yes.
And so more and more employers are going to be looking toward filling roles with young people. But there are some really important rules that they need to understand about the laws that apply to minors, who is a minor, what occupations are minors allowed to perform, what are they not allowed to do, what are the hours of work, both during the day, time of day, and the max hours per week that they can work. And then there's also some additional safety concerns that employers need to be aware of, because for a lot of minors, this will be their first experience in the workplace. And so they need the training, they need the development so that they can work safely and know how to spot hazards and know how to, know how to work safely and not risk injury to themselves or others. So the first thing that we talk about when we talk about who's a minor, under both state and federal law, a minor is any worker who is under the age of 18. Now, the state and federal labor laws primarily address restrictions relating to employees that are 14 to 17 years of age, because employment for individuals, for minors that are under 14 is very, very limited. If you're under 14, you're allowed to perform chores in your own house for money. You can deliver newspapers. It's the old, the newspaper on the bike, delivering. You can babysit on a casual basis. You can work, in performing arts. There are lots of child, actors and actresses. You can work as a home worker. This one's hilarious. Work as a home worker, gathering evergreens and making evergreen wreaths, which tells you that the evergreen wreath industry has a significant lobby in Washington, because that is written into the federal laws about what children under the age of 14 can do. You can work for a business that is owned by your own parents, not an uncle, not a grandparent, but by your own parents, if it's not in a prohibited hazardous occupation. And so that's the only stuff that a minor under 14 can do, with the exception in Kentucky. Again, Kentucky tracks the federal law pretty closely, but there are two extra exceptions in Kentucky. In Kentucky, if you're at least 11, you can work as a caddy on a golf course.
Wow.
But if you're 11 or 12, you can't actually carry the bags. You have to use a pull cart until you're 13. At 13, you can start carrying the bags, and at 16, you can start driving a cart.
So no 11-year-olds driving carts.
No 11-year-olds driving carts, and they can't actually carry the clubs on their backs.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do which is important because of the explosion of youth sports, is you can work as a referee, an umpire, or a sideline official at youth sporting events if you're at least 12. But the people that are playing, the participants in the game, have to be younger than you. So if you're 12, you can't be a side judge for a 14-year-old game. You have to be, it had to be
younger.
U12 or U10, U9.
Okay.
They have to be younger than you. There has to be an adult there supervising. And part of the reason for that, unfortunately, is because of all of the yelling that the parents do at the umpires and the referees. You got to have an adult there to keep things under control. And the referee, the minor that's working as a referee, has to have written parental consent to do that work. So those are the things you can do if you're 14 or if you're under 14. Nothing else really are you allowed to do as a work for hire in Kentucky.
Well, and I want to say, I can't tell you how often I get calls from parents that are like, I've got a really bright 12-year-old who wants to do something. And so having those guidelines is very important. I think for employers, they're really eager to know what can I and can I not do with 14 to 17-year-olds.
Right. And so 14 to 17-year-olds, there are restrictions based on their age group. And there's one set of rules, by and large, for 16 to 17-year-olds. And then there's a slightly different set of rules for 14 and 15-year-olds. And in part, that's because, there's a lot of development that occurs between a 14 and a 17-year-old. And, things like getting your driver's license and, and maybe you've got, a summer or two of work experience already in by the time you're 17. So you look to what the age of the minor is. Now, the first thing that you look at is from a safety standpoint, regardless of your age, if you're under the age of 18, there are these hazardous occupations, there are about 17 of them, that you're not allowed to do at all, no exceptions. Jobs operating power-driven machinery, and we'll put a list of all these up so that people can see them. Woodworking machines, metal forming machines, working at paper manufacturing machines, and compactors. And you see that compactor a lot of times, like if you're working at a grocery store or at a Costco or something, and you break down pallets, and then you take the cardboard out, and there's a big machine that crushes it. Well, you might be able to load cardboard in that machine,
But you can't turn it on.
But you can't turn it on.
Yeah.
You can't run it. You can't be anywhere near that machine when it's operating because of the risk of injury. And all of these are generally because of the risk of injury if you're not experienced around this type of equipment. You can't work bandsaws. You can't do logging. You can't use chainsaws or axes. That means you can't cut firewood, right? So you can't have a job cutting firewood if you're at a campground if you're under the age of 18. You can't use industrial baking equipment. And that's where, if you've seen the news where we've had some employers run into some fines and penalties because they were allowing minors to work the mixers in the restaurant. They can't use mixers, dough rollers, dough sheeters. They can't do any of this big power equipment because there's a risk that they'll be injured by those moving parts. You can't work as a meat processor, and that's everything from breaking down the animals initially for the initial processing all the way to running the slicing machine at the deli.
Okay.
Right? You cannot use a meat slicer.
Right.
Yeah, if you're under the age of 18. Lawn care equipment. So if you're 16 or 17, you can use a lawnmower, an edger, a weed trimmer. If you're 14 or 15, you can't. Okay. And you also can't use any other type of motorized lawn equipment. You can't use a tiller. You can't use, the big industrial machines and stuff if you're under the age of 18. And then there's a whole additional list of rules that make a lot of sense, again, as you look at them. You can't work around explosives, where explosives are manufactured or stored. You can't work in a coal mine. That's, you can't work where you could be exposed to radioactive materials or ionizing radiation. You can't work in jobs manufacturing bricks, tile, or clay products, which is an interesting kind of niche. You can't do wrecking or demolition. You can't work as a roofer. You can't work near a roof. If doing any work where again, you might be subject to being around ladders or stuff that can fall off the roof. You can't do excavation. You can't do trenching if the trench is more than 4 feet deep. You can't work in Kentucky where alcoholic beverages are distilled, processed, bottled, or sold for consumption. I feel like the guy didn't say anything. Bought, processed, or sold, unless it's incidental to the employee's primary business. So you can work at a grocery store where they sell beer,
Okay.
but you can't work at a bar, right?
Okay. Sure.
You can work at a restaurant where they serve alcohol because the primary thing there is food. But again, you can't work at a bar where the primary product is alcohol. And in Kentucky, you can't work in a pool hall or a billiard room. So those are the big hazardous occupations. There's also a set of rules about driving. And basically the gist of that is if you're under 17 years of age, you cannot work in an occupation that requires regular driving. If you're 17, you can drive occasionally, but you can't have a job that requires driving as a main part of the job.
Like you can't be a delivery driver.
Can't be a delivery driver. You can't work a sales route that, where you drive from customer to customer to make sales calls. You can't work towing. You can't transport others, and you can't even work as an outside helper with somebody else driving the vehicle as part of your work.
So you can't be an Uber or a Lyft driver because you're driving others around.
Right.
That's not
right.
Still have to be 18 to do that, right?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Now, if you're 17, again, you can drive incidentally, but it can't be a primary piece of your work. So there's like generally a 20% cap. So somebody might say, hey, we need a part for something. Go over to the store and get it. Drive the truck and go get it. You've got your driver's license. If you do that occasionally, you're not going to get sideways with the rules. But if your job is to go and run errands every day, then you're going to get into trouble because that's not just occasional. So,
well, and I do know that sometimes federal law is different than state law, and Kentucky law might be different than Ohio and Indiana. Where do we draw the line? Where do we figure out what we're supposed to do as employers?
So you need to know both the federal and the state law.
Okay.
And whichever law is the most protective to the minor is the law that you have to follow.
Okay.
So, for example, in federal law doesn't prohibit a minor from working around alcohol or working in a distillery or working in a pool hall. But Kentucky law does. So employers in Kentucky have to follow Kentucky law on that.
Okay.
So,
well, let's talk a little bit about hours, because I know that's another common thing. School's going to let out, and I think students are allowed to work more hours during the summertime than not.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the rules related to what you can do are all related to safety. The rules related to hours of work are all related to not interfering with school. Okay. Right. So the primary purpose when you're a minor is to finish school, get your education, and then, join the workforce, go on to college, whatever is right for you. But these rules are designed to keep kids in school and not to interfere with their schoolwork. And so there are distinctions based on age relating to the hours of work that you can perform, your start time, your end time. So for example, and we've got a chart about this, if you're 14 or 15 years old and school is in session, right, you can't start working before 7 a.m. You have to finish by 7 p.m. You cannot work hours while school is in session unless it's part of a co-op program. And you're limited on the number of hours you can work per day. It's 3 hours, 8 hours on a non-school day, and no more than 18 hours a week when school's in session. If you're 16 to 17-year-old, you have a little more latitude. You can start working as early as 6 a.m. You have to finish by 10:30 or 11 if your parents give you permission to work late. But your employer's got to have that permission in writing, and they have to keep that on site. You can work 6 hours a day on a school day, 8 hours a day on a non-school day, and no more than 30 hours per week. If you're participating in a school program or you have a school certificate, then you can work, if you're 16 or 17, up to 40 hours per week. But again, that's generally going to be tied to some sort of apprenticeship program, vocational education program, something like that, that's allowing you to work 40 hours per week, because normally a school will not give a minor permission during the school term to be working a full-time job, right?
Okay.
But one of the important things to keep in mind is when school's in session, all minors are capped at working no more than 40 hours per week. So there should be no overtime hours for minors when school's in session. And if you have a minor hitting the overtime cap, you're going to be sideways with the child labor laws. Now, when school is not in session, the rules are a little different, a little more relaxed. If you're 14 to 15 years old, again, 7 a.m. start time, but you can work from June 1st until, well, the rule says Labor Day, but technically school's back in session in Kentucky every year before Labor Day.
Sure.
So it's really from June 1st until the time that school goes back into session. You can work till 9 p.m. if you're under the age of 16.
Okay.
Up to 8 hours per day, up to 40 hours per week. But again, no overtime if you're 14 to 15 years old. If you're 16 to 17, you can start at 6 in the morning. You can work till 1 a.m. And there are no restrictions on the hours that you can work. Another thing is, if the minor is new to the workforce, right, new to this job, they may require some training. Training is considered work time. And so you're going to have to pay them for that training time.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't say, well, just come and watch. And, if they're required to be there and if they're required to be watching, and, you've got to pay them for that training time, even if they're not actually performing work. If you're requiring them to be there in order to learn the job, you're going to treat that as work time. So that's going to count. You're going to have to pay for it, and you're going to have to count it toward their daily or weekly maximums.
So even if I'm a job shadowing someone to learn how they do it, you still have to pay me if I'm a high school student or student, right, minor.
Yes.
So
if you're being hired as an employee. Now, if you're coming in just to learn, right, through like a, job shadowing, come into work, take your daughters to work,
like a volunteer day,
or
sure.
something just to learn, that's not. But if you're becoming an employee of that employer and that job shadowing is so that you can perform that work, you're going to have to be paid for that time. Okay. So we've touched a little bit on the documents and the record keeping. It's really important to make sure that the employer has these records, and they also have to be maintained at the work site where the minor is working. Because if the Department of Labor shows up and they ask to see those logs, you've got to be able to present those. And you actually need a log of every minor that works on your work site with their name and their address, and you've got to be able to show that you got valid proof of their age. And that's really important because, again, the difference between what a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old can do is pretty significant. And so you need to be able to document and show and have very clear in your own mind, the ages of each one of your minor workers. Parental consent forms have to be maintained at the work site, and a school certificate, if you're, if it's part of a program and the minor is able to work those extra hours, you have to maintain that school certificate on site where the minor works. And the other thing is, parental consent is good. Once you have it, it's good until it's either revoked or the minor reaches the age of 18. But a school certificate expires after a year. So you have to keep those up to date if you've got somebody that continues to work for you for longer than 12 months.
Last but not least, they can call you with questions,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So we'll put your contact information up, and appreciate you kind of getting it in there and getting down to the nitty gritty, because I know it's an important topic this time of year.
It is very important.
Right.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shannon Schumacher, Account Executive, Kentucky Market Leader. At Haran, we champion bold innovation to help employers and individuals thrive. As an industry thought leader, we explore new horizons in healthcare, benefits, employee engagement, and wellness. We work harder to deliver all the strategic benefits, planning, and execution you expect from a true partner. And we do it with laser focus on your short and long-term outcomes to help manage your benefits while improving your employee experience.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today to hear a little bit from Candace and from Julie. Thank you to our podcast sponsors, CVG, Sea Crew Consulting, and Haran. Don't forget to register for Eggs and Issues, Tourism's Impact on NKY, as well as our upcoming HR 100 event. You can register for both of those events at nkychamber.com/events. Finally, if you are a member who would like to be featured on the Northern Kentucky Spotlight podcast, or if you're interested in joining the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, please reach out to Lynn Aitlin. And if you're interested in sharing your workforce strategies and resources on NKY at work, please reach out to Nancy Spivey. You can find both of their contact information on the screen in front of you or on our website, nkychamber.com, at our staff directory. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll talk to you all next week.